All right, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry we were experiencing a little technical difficulties, but we seem to have gotten over it. So good afternoon. I'm glad everybody could make it to our webinar on government contract funding for small business. This is our Fast Facts show with two great guests. Our aim is to get you out of here in 25 minutes or less. If there are any questions, we'll be sure to answer them at the end, though we hope to cover as much as possible in the fast amount of time. I'm Brandon Skolnick, your host. I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur and love getting into joint ventures. I've known our two guests. You would be pleased with the information they have for you today. Rules, how to interact. At the bottom right-hand side of your screen, type your comments and I'll capture them and we'll answer them at the end. All right. So who's this webinar for? Never won a contract because you're afraid to bid. This webinar is for you. If you're worried about capital or worried about how you're going to expand your payroll or buy equipment, this webinar is for you. But if you've won, but you've struggled, maybe you had to give up a contract because you just couldn't source the funding. Or maybe if you threw out too many seeds and luckily they all came to fruition, but you didn't have enough capital to source in order to fund your government contract. This is the webinar for you. So the takeaway here is that government contractors, no matter how small or how big, have to essentially float themselves once they win the contract for 2 to 3 months before they can invoice the government. So that's something to think about. So let's talk about our first presenter. Stacy, she's going to give you an overview of the contracting process, when funding is needed, and some traditional ways of funding. So jump on here, Stacy.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stacy Vaughn. I'm a managing partner of dUnity Group, and we're based here in Metro Atlanta, Georgia. And one thing that we have found in our years of government contracting, my husband and I have worked together for over 10 years helping businesses grow. But I spent helping businesses in the government contracting world for over 20 years with big industry from Northrop Grumman to Lockheed Martin. A few of you guys know of them, and then also worked as a DoD employee. So I have done it all and been there and seen all the excitement and all the fun things that are about to come about. So here's the overview about government contracting process. You need to research your customer. Who's your customer? Is it Department of Energy, the Army, or even the simple little ones like Department of Interior? You need to know what they're buying and to see if what your service or product they are buying and they're utilizing. Because if you're just throwing something out to U.S. Navy and they're not buying it, it doesn't do you any good. And you're spending a lot of time that you don't need to. Proposals. The proposal process can be very daunting if you are trying to do it all yourself. You need to really build a resource team and utilize great writers. Writers will help you in this process of looking at it as a third eye, and also a consulting firm that will, like ours, to help you give you an objective view to see if you're even viable for that contract. Because proposals can be daunting in timeline and also can be very expensive if you don't do it right. Submitting the contract. It can be, it's about devils in the details. So make sure your federal registration is up to date. Make sure your capability statement has, which is your one-page marketing sheet, has all the recent past performances. It's not too old. If it's 5 years or more, unless it's a unique situation, we would not put that in there. And then also make sure that all the pages have been signed. Make sure that your font is readable. And then also make sure it was due in East Coast, West Coast, sealed. All that makes an important situation for any businesses to make sure they're submitting appropriately, and making sure you know how to follow up with the you're submitting it to. So winning the contract, that is like, okay, now we won the contract, now you got to do the work. And work can be very daunting in that aspect too. But the one big thing you'll have is what we call a proposal time period, where you talk to the contracting officer when you win the contract. That post-award. So the post-award is real important. You need to ask, why did I win this contract? And making sure the expectations are met. And then always have great communication. Never assume. You can never not communicate enough. I can say that a ton of times. Performance can be a big issue. Did you put in your plan to work with a recruiting firm or subcontracting? All that performance is very important. And the timelines that you meet, make sure in your performance that you know how to invoice the government. That's a big one, because if you don't invoice them the right way, you won't get paid. And as you know, contractors have absorbed a lot of expenses in the front end. So you got to know what you're going to invest in, so that the performance may take longer than you think, or the invoice may take longer. So where does the money be needed? In the various parts and pieces you're going to invest in, or return on investment is always the researching. You may have to pay for certain databases, as I stated before. In the proposal part, you may have to resource some writers and team members, but the big key areas are going to be when you win the contract, performance time, and invoicing to the stage. These are the three big areas that you're going to need some kind of upfront money, because the government, as good as they are, they can take up to 90 days to get you paid for the first invoice. And the reason you need to know this is you're one of thousands, hundreds of thousands of contractors starting new contracts every day. And if you look at the SAMS registration, the SAMS registration has over 650,000 businesses registered. And if you don't keep that up to date, you won't get paid. So it doesn't matter if it's simple acquisition or $1 million contract. So traditional ways of funding, self-funding. I took my 401k and I invested in my business and I made it happen. That's kind of a traditional way. Non-traditional, another traditional way, I call it non-traditional a little bit, is family and friends, and that's always a good and bad. And of course, our other traditional way is banks. And of course, unfortunately, banks have got a bad four-letter word going on right now. So self-funding is not always a great option. You can't get access to the money, or you get taxed on your 401k and that's not utilized the way you wanted, and you don't be able to use the full funding. Family and friends, that can definitely be a strain on the relationship, but their expectations may not be realistic with you to have the payback as quickly as they want. And then traditional banking is not interested these days. Their minds are elsewhere, and if it's not in the big dollars, they're not going to help you fund it. Or if you don't have been banking with them for a while, they're definitely not interested in that aspect. And there are a lot of banks that are just one-on-one customer, and they don't really work with small businesses. That's my part, and here's your next person.
Thanks, Stacy. Up next, we have Samir Patel, the creator behind ModeCap, and he's going to tell us how to get into government contract lending. Station Capital. You. All right. Come on, Samir.
Thanks, Brandon. It's good to be here today, and thanks to everyone for joining us as well. It's great to be here. How did this all start? Really, the story began 30 years ago with my dad. He has a strong background in investing and in lending, and over the last few decades, just being around him and being a part of the deals and stuff that he's done, I got a healthy appreciation for how lending occurs. Definitely lending isn't just relegated to the banks. There are a lot of private investors out there. There are a lot of firms out there that provide money outside the banks, and Mobilization Capital is one of them. Atlanta. I graduated from high school here in Atlanta, and then I went to West Point. And one of the things I did at West Point that's kind of unique is that I bought a hotel while I was there. And it was really my first step in becoming a small business owner. And really, I think any small business owner will tell you that cash flow, and cash flow are probably the three biggest watchwords of any business owner. And so through that hotel, learned a lot about cash flow management and running a business and what it takes to create a successful enterprise. So fast forward, graduated from West Point, then I deployed to Iraq. In Iraq, I was a platoon leader, meaning I commanded 25 soldiers on a combat outpost along the Iraqi-Iranian border, and we did counterinsurgency operations there. And then second deployment to Afghanistan, I served as a government procurement official, contracting officer representative. And from the government perspective, their day looks like that. They're very tired at the end of the day. Lots and lots of paperwork to go through on the contracting side for the government. And really, through that job, through that role, I learned what does it take to award a contract. So while I was in Afghanistan, I managed tens of millions of dollars, and I handed out close to 70 to 80 government contracts. And I learned, how does the government award contracts to folks, and then I also got to talk to small business owners and understand their challenges in meeting the demands and the requirements set forth by the government. So I got out of the Army, and I was thinking to myself, you know what, maybe government contracting is for me. But then I realized, going back to my small business days as a hotel owner, about the cash flow and what I knew being a contracting officer, that the average contractor has to float themselves for at least 2 to 3 months. And so mobilization capital is really the intersection between my small business experience and then my lending experience and then my government contracting experience as well. And so that's what created Mobilization Capital about a year ago. We've funded dozens of loans so far. We're helping out dozens of contractors each month on getting forward and getting them moving forward on their contracts. So how can we help you? So the first thing is win a contract, right? On day 0, you should be popping a bottle of champagne. You should be congratulating yourself, because it takes a lot of effort to just get there in the first place to win a contract. A bottle of champagne, realize that you got to absorb 60 days before you get your first payment. And I would say that every time you win a government contract, it's sort of like, especially on the service contracts, such as let's say you win a building or something like that, especially on the service contracts, I would say it's almost like starting a new business each time. And that's how you should approach it, because there's a lot of cost-intensive things you got to do to get things moving. And so one of the top 4 ways Mobilization Capital helps, going on this example of starting a new business, our pre-invoice financing helps with covering your payroll. Let's say you win a contract to clean a bunch of buildings on a military base. You're gonna have to hire probably 4 to 5 employees right up front, but you haven't even billed the government yet for $1. Going off our example, you probably have to buy waxers or cleaning materials, or maybe even lawnmowers or something like that. We definitely help with the rental and purchase of equipment. And probably the most important thing, actually, which is bonding and insurance. A lot of government contracts are awarded on the basis that you have a bond or insurance policy in place. And if you don't have that in place, on the day you start or the day you're awarded, that could be a problem. It could lead to potentially even losing that contract if you don't have it right up front. So you have to get bonded and get an insurance policy, but you haven't even billed the government yet. So what do? Well, you can go to friends and family, or you can come to Mobilization Capital and we can take care of that for you. And then travel to the performance site. It's something to remember about government contracts. It's not like you win a government contract on day 0 and then on day 1 you're beginning to perform the work. It doesn't really work that way. You probably have 2 to 3 weeks, at least on a service contract, you probably have at least 2 to 3 weeks of going to the site where the work is going to be done. You are going to meet the key players. You're going to basically figure out how the work is actually going to get done after you win that contract. So that requires, travel to the site. You probably have to pay for hotel rooms. You probably have some other ancillary expenses associated with that site survey. So we also covered that at Mobilization Capital. So literally, on day 0, on day 1, we provide the financing you need to. A couple real world examples here. So not only does Mobilization Capital help on the front end, getting you mobilized, but we also provide financing in the middle and end of contracting as well. To give you a quick example, payroll financing is very important to a lot of government contractors. So in this example, you may have gotten started on the contract, and that's great. You are probably in month 2, month 3, and you're probably invoicing the government on a monthly basis. And one day or one invoice cycle, you perhaps something gets messed up with that invoice. Numbers get transposed. The government kicks it back because there's an error of something of some sort. And what happens is when the government kicks back an invoice, it often takes weeks, if not a month, to get that invoice settled or fixed. But you've got payroll to make, and payroll always occurs every 2 weeks. And so we've had a lot of government contractors come approach us about getting payroll financing, where basically we'll give them a 15, 20-day loan. We'll let them figure out the issue with the government, and then they get paid back by the government, and then they pay us back. Invoicing, I can't stress enough how important it is to get it done right, but also be prepared for the fact that it's never 100% when it comes to invoicing. So you better be prepared for what happens if an invoice gets kicked back. So after this webinar, contact us at mobilenationcapital.com. You can go to the website, mobilenationcapital.com. Call me. My contact info is posted here. And get pre-qualified. The best thing you can do is, if you know you're actively bidding on government contracts, come talk to us first so we can get you pre-qualified. We can get an understanding of your situation so that when you do win the contract, you're ready to go. You've already got the funding in place. You've got money to get your bond, your insurance premium. You already know with supreme confidence that you can handle the payroll of your first 5 employees without worrying about it. You're not scrambling. That's the benefit of contacting us now, so that we can pre-qualify you for financing. And thank you very much.
All right, there are your fast facts on getting your government contract funded. Hope we've answered some questions and provided valuable insight. Again, here's the contact information for both guests. Just jot it down, and I'd like to give a thank you to both of them for coming today and sharing with us. And I'd like to thank you for coming on and learning with us. So look out for more great webinars, and I'll see you soon.